Court tutor Livia Sen burned Brienne Calrow's moon etiquette cards in the old wolf hearth and smiled as if she had saved the Vare court from embarrassment. The cards curled slowly. Pale ivory edges blackened first, then the thin moon ink lines that Brienne had drawn by hand. Bow angle, bloodline distance, widow's entry right, servant shield phrase, first cup order, old house refusal forms, morning silver placement, correction sequence, before a greeting became insult. Each card vanished into blue-white flame, while the noble guests watched from beneath the ribbed arches of the Vare old court. No one gasped. That hurt more than laughter would have. Laughter admitted cruelty was happening. Silence made cruelty look like taste. Brienne stood beside the hearth with ash already rising toward her face, her widow's gray sleeves patched at the cuffs, her hands folded tightly enough for her nails to bite skin. She did not reach into the flame. She did not beg for paper already being killed. The old court had taught her that dignity was sometimes the last courtesy left when everyone else had abandoned theirs. Livia lifted the final card between two long fingers. A low-born widow should never have been placed near royal instruction. A few noblewomen lowered their eyes to hide smiles. Brienne looked at the card. Western Wolf House greeting. Do not answer a morning bow with a hunting hand. Her throat tightened. That one should not burn before Lord Keswick enters, she said. Livia laughed softly. Lord Keswick has bowed before kings since before your husband died in a stable corridor. The old insult passed cleanly through the hall. Stable corridor. Not battlefield. Not service passage. Not the night Brienne's husband had taken a blade meant for a noble heir and been remembered only as a body removed before supper. Brienne did not flinch. She looked past Livia to Wolf King Aldrin Vare. He sat beneath the moon wolf canopy on a throne of black wood and silver bone, one gloved hand resting on the arm carved with old pack laws. He was not a soft king. Nothing in the Vare old court had survived soft men. Aldrin's dark hair fell to his collar like a shadow cut loose, and his gray wolf eyes watched the burning cards without warmth, without haste, without giving Brienne the mercy of pretending he did not understand what was happening. Livia had asked permission. He had allowed it, not with delight. Worse, with calculation. Foreign wolf houses had arrived for the winter obedience feast. Noble guests had complained that Brienne's quiet corrections made them feel watched. A widow with soot at her hems and no blood crest had stood beside archways for 3 years, murmuring reminders before old houses insulted one another by accident. She had saved them from curses they considered folklore, from duels they called tradition, from blood feuds that began with the wrong hand lifted at the wrong cup. They called it fussing. They called it servant nerves. They called it widow's habit, as if grief made women count things that did not matter. Livia turned to Aldrin. Majesty, the court will proceed more smoothly without interruption. Royal manners should not depend on kitchen cards. Brienne's fingers tightened. Kitchen cards. The moon etiquette cards had been older than the tutor's office, older than Livia's polished family crest. Brienne had copied them from half-burned protocol leaves kept beneath the servant's stair, because servants remembered what nobles renamed decoration after forgetting why it existed. Aldrin looked at Brienne. Is there danger in removing them? His voice did not soften. Brienne met his eyes and hated that her heart still answered the force of him. The wolf inside his blood pressed through the hall, controlled and immense, making every noble stand a little straighter without knowing why. He was beautiful in the cruel way. Winter was beautiful from behind glass. Yes, she said. Livia sighed. There is always danger, according to Mistress Calrow. Not always, Brienne said. Only when old blood enters an old court and pride stands where courtesy should. A hush moved through the chamber. That was too near accusation. Aldrin's gaze sharpened. Explain. Brienne looked toward the great doors, where Lord Keswick's banner had already appeared beyond the silver threshold. If Keswick enters under morning rite, no hunting hand may answer his bow. If a hunting hand answers grief, the old court records it as pursuit. His house will be legally insulted before first wine. Livia dropped the final card into the fire. Blue-white flame swallowed it. Then let the old court learn modern grace, she said. Lord Keswick entered. He was tall, white-haired, and wrapped in black wolf fur. A mourning chain hung across his chest for his eldest son, dead less than 1 moon. He stopped 3 paces inside the threshold and bowed not from the waist, but with one hand lowered toward the floor, palm open. Brienne closed her eyes for one breath. Mourning bow. From the corner of the hall, young Lord Ravel answered with 2 fingers lifted near his shoulder. Hunting hand. The flame in the hearth went out. Not dimmed. Out. Cold blue ash burst upward from the burned cards and scattered through the hall like moths made of moonlight. Nobles cried out and stepped back. Pale rectangles formed in the air around them, each one the size of Brienne's lost cards, each one rimmed in silver fire. One appeared before Lord Ravel. Broken courtesy. Hunting answer given to mourning bow. Legal meaning pursuit of grief. Blood. Lord Keswick's eyes turned wolf gold. Every candle in the old court bent toward him. Eldrin rose from the throne. Hold. The word should have struck the court like iron. It did not. Lord Keswick did not hold. Lord Ravel did not lower his hand. The musicians forgot the obedience chord. The cupbearers froze halfway through first service. Even the herald at the moon doors opened his mouth and could not remember the king's entrance call. Aldrin's jaw tightened. Bow, he commanded. No one moved. Not because they refused, because the old court had forgotten how. Only one sound answered him. Pale moon rectangles turning in the air around every noble, every lord, every tutor, every guest who had laughed at Brienne's cards as if protection were decoration. Livia's face went white. Brienne opened her eyes. A burned card floated before her, untouched by ash, its moon ink clear as winter water. Correct before command, or command stands on insult. Then, a second line formed beneath it. Mourning bow was answered with hunting hand after the correction card was burned. Aldrin looked from the frozen court to Brienne Calrow. His voice did not soften. What correction did my court burn before Lord Keswick entered under mourning rite? Livia Sen answered, before the burned correction card finished turning in the cold air. Majesty, old mourning rite is ceremonial memory, not binding court law. The pale rectangles hung around the Veyer old court like pieces of the moon cut thin and sharpened at the edges. Nobles stood half-bowed, half-frozen, their bodies caught between manners they could not complete and commands they could not remember. Lord Keswick remained 3 paces inside the silver threshold, one hand still lowered in mourning bow. Young Lord Ravel's hunting hand stayed lifted near his shoulder, 2 fingers curled as if he had loosed an invisible hound into grief. Brienne Calrow did not move toward the floating card. She had learned long ago that if she reached too quickly for proof, nobles would call it grasping. So she stood beside the dead hearth with ash on her widow's sleeves and let the old court show what paper had been preventing. Wolf King Aldrin Vere looked from the frozen nobles to her. What correction did my court burn before Lord Keswick entered under mourning rite? His voice did not soften. Brienne met his gaze. The Western Wolf House greeting. Livia gave a small laugh. A greeting. A boundary, Brienne said. A custom. A legal distance between grief and pursuit. The words quieted the hall more deeply than the moon cards had. Courtesy sounded small until blood law stood underneath it. Aldrin's eyes narrowed. Explain the correction. Brienne looked at Lord Keswick first. His wolf gold eyes were bright with old house fury, but beneath it lay grief so raw that even the candles seemed afraid to lean too close. A mourning bow lowers the hand open to show the house enters without teeth. The answering hand must remain below the heart until first cup is offered. Lord Ravel's fingers twitched helplessly near his shoulder. Brienne looked at him. A hunting hand lifted before first cup means the receiving court treats grief, blood, as prey. Lord Ravel's face emptied. He had not known. That did not make it harmless. Livia stepped in. Lord Ravel was never trained in antique wolf gestures. That is precisely why such rules should not govern modern diplomacy. Courtesy is only decoration after the blood law beneath it has been obeyed, Brienne said. A cold breath passed through the arches. The card before Brienne brightened, but it did not answer for her. It waited. Aldrin noticed. So did Brian. The moon etiquette cards did not solve the insult. They marked what had been broken. Someone still had to read the old court before the old court chose blood. Aldrin looked at his cupbearers, still frozen with silver trays trembling in their hands. First cup. No one moved. Not rebellion. Failure. Brienne turned toward the nearest cupbearer, a young servant girl, with terror shining in both eyes. Do not lift the wine, Livia snapped. Do not instruct royal servants. Brienne ignored her. If wine rises before the refusal form is spoken, Keswick may claim forced fellowship after insult. The girl froze harder. Aldrin looked at Brienne. What refusal form? The old house refusal form, Brienne said. The correction card named it. If the wrong greeting is given, the insult can be paused before first cup by offering the harmed house the right to refuse wine without dishonor. Livia's expression sharpened. Small, fast. Brienne saw it. Aldrin saw her see it. Where is that form? He asked. Brienne looked toward the ash in the hearth. It was written beneath the greeting correction. Livia spread one hand. Convenient. No, Brienne said. Necessary. A pale rectangle turned before Lord Keswick. Moon ink formed slowly, but only around the edges, not enough to complete the lost words. Brienne understood at once. The card would not rebuild a protocol no one in authority admitted mattered. She would have to read memory. Not magic. Memory. She faced Keswick and lowered her own hand, palm open, stopping just below the ribs. Not a noble bow, not a court performance. The practical shape of mourning right taught by servants who watched blood feuds begin over inches. The harmed house may refuse first cup, she said carefully. Without insult to crown, without debt to host, without pursuit claim answered. Lord Keswick's breathing roughened. The moon rectangle before him steadied. Brienne continued. The receiving court must lower hunting hand, name grief safe beneath roof, and offer wine only after refusal is accepted or set aside. The card brightened. Lord Ravel gasped as his raised fingers jerked downward at last, as if the old court had remembered the first correction through Brienne's mouth. He stumbled back, pale and shaking. I did not know, he whispered. Lord Keswick's wolf-gold eyes did not leave him. Your ignorance entered after my grief. The hall trembled. From the black rafters came a sound like claws waking in wood. House curses did not roar when stirred. They remembered. Aldrin's hand tightened on the arm of his throne. Brienne saw the movement and understood something he had not said. The old court was tied to his command more deeply than any feast ritual. If legal insult awakened beneath his roof, his wolf authority would have to answer it or break around it. Livia spoke quickly. Majesty, this is being exaggerated by fear. The court will stabilize once the cards finish their display. Brienne turned to her. The cards are not displaying. They are counting. Livia's mouth closed. Aldrin looked at the floating rectangles around the nobles. Counting what? Broken courtesies that became legal insults before first cup, Brienne said. She pointed, one by one. Morning bow given, Hunting Hand answered. First cup lifted before refusal right was spoken. Old house refusal form burned with the correction sequence. The moon rectangles trembled. Only then did the burned card before Brienne answer. Silver fire ran along its pale edge, then crossed the empty air between Keswick and Ravel. The old hearth gave one cold blue breath. A clean line formed beneath the first warning. Keswick's morning rite entry was announced before Livia burned the correction card. The court went still. Aldrin looked from the glowing line to Livia Sen. His voice did not soften. Who knew Keswick came under mourning right before Livia burned the correction card? Livia Sen looked toward the moon doors before she looked at the burned correction card. It was quick. Too quick for most of the frozen court to notice. Brienne Calrow noticed. She had spent 3 years noticing the half-breath before insult, the hand that lifted too high, the cup raised before grief had been named, the smile that arrived one heartbeat before a noble, decided correction was beneath him. The pale moon rectangles still hovered around the Vare old court, each one marking a courtesy broken into legal danger. Lord Keswick remained near the silver threshold, his mourning chain dark against black fur. Young Lord Revell stood, with his hand finally lowered, face white with the knowledge that ignorance had nearly become bloodclaim. Wolf King Aldrin Vare stood before the old hearth. Who knew Keswick came under mourning right before Livia burned the correction card? His voice did not soften. Livia recovered with beautiful speed. Majesty, herald announcements are ceremonial notices. They are not binding protocol warnings. Brienne looked at the ash inside the hearth. A notice ignored is not ignorance. It is permission given to insult. Livia turned cold eyes on her. You are eager to dress every mistake as malice. No, Brienne said. I am careful not to let malice hide inside mistake. The moon cards did not brighten. They waited. That mattered. The cards marked insult, but they did not gather proof for the court. Brienne had to read what the old walls had kept. Aldrin looked toward the moon doors. Bring the entry announcement. The herald at the threshold swallowed. He still could not remember the full royal call, but he could move now that Brienne had restored the refusal form. He reached into the silver box beside the door and drew out a narrow strip of pale parchment edged in blue thread. Livia's fingers tightened around her sleeve. Small, fast. Brian saw it. Aldrin saw her see it. The herald carried the strip to the hearth and bowed awkwardly, uncertain which protocol now governed his body. Brienne did not correct him. Not yet. Too many corrections at once could break a frightened servant faster than insult broke a lord. Aldrin took the strip and held it open. Read. The herald's voice shook. Lord Keswick of the Western House enters beneath mourning rite. Grief. Chain witnessed. First cup delayed until host recognition. The old court stirred. First cup delayed. The words had been there before the card burned. Livia gave a soft sigh. Standard phrasing. It is announced for dignity, not instruction. Brienne looked at her. Then why was the correction card burned after the announcement? Livia smiled faintly. Many cards were burned. One mattered first. Aldrin's gaze cut to Brienne. Show me. She did not soften for him. He had allowed her cards to burn because noble pride had been more convenient than servant correction. His attention now did not erase that. Moon door herald mark, Brienne said. Aldrin looked down. Where? Brienne pointed to the blue thread along the parchment edge. Mourning notices are edged in blue. Feast notices are edged in silver. Challenge notices are edged in red. A tutor trained in court entry knows the difference before the herald speaks. Livia said, Any court child knows thread colors. That proves nothing. Then bring the burned correction ash. A hush moved through the hall. Livia laughed once. You want ash examined now? I want the order of burning. Aldrin looked to the hearth guards. Bring it. One guard knelt by the old wolf hearth and gathered the cold blue ash into a shallow silver tray. The ash did not scatter. It held faint rectangular shapes, each memory of a card that had burned. Brienne looked over them carefully, hands still folded. She would not touch the ash until the court understood she was reading, not pleading. There, A thin crescent of moon ink remained along one charred edge. Western Wolf House greeting. The correction card. Brienne pointed. This card burned last. Livia's mouth tightened. Because I held it last. Everyone saw that. Yes, Brienne said. After the Herald notice was announced, the court shifted. Aldrin looked from the blue thread entry strip to the ash. What else? Brienne looked at the parchment again. Tutor, receipt mark. Livia went still. The Herald blinked. Mistress? Brienne pointed to the lower corner of the entry announcement. When a notice affects protocol sequence, it is handed first to the court tutor, then to the king's steward. The tutor marks receipt, so the correction order can be prepared. Aldrin turned the strip. In the lower corner, pressed in pale wax, was Livia Sen's tutor seal. A narrow moon quill, inside a laurel ring. The hall went silent. Livia spoke carefully. All entry notices pass through my office. Not all require correction, Brienne said. This one did. Aldrin's eyes sharpened. Because of mourning rite. Because Keswick entered grieving, Ravel stood under a hunting house banner, and first cup was already arranged in the wrong order. Lord Ravel looked sick. You knew? Livia did not answer him. The moon rectangle before Brienne turned slowly, but still did not speak. Brienne understood. It would answer only after the whole sequence stood in the open. She named it clearly. Moon Door Herald Notice, announced mourning rite. Blue thread marked grief entry. First cup delay was written before Keswick crossed the threshold. Livia's tutor seal received the notice. The Western Wolf House correction card was held back and burned after the notice reached her hand. Only then did the burned card answer. Silver fire rose from the ashtray, crossed the blue thread parchment, and circled Livia's pale tutor seal. The old hearth gave one cold breath. A line formed in clean moon ink above the ash. Mourning rite notice reached the tutor's hand before the correction card was burned. Aldrin looked from the glowing seal to Livia Sen. His voice did not soften. Who received the mourning? Rite notice and chose the fire anyway? The tutor seal glowed around Livia Sen's mark like a small moon wound. For the first time since the hearth went cold, the court did not look at Brienne Calrow as if she had made trouble. They looked at the blue thread notice, the ashtray, the burned correction card, and Livia's pale seal. Order had begun to form in the open, and order was more dangerous than accusation. Livia bowed toward Wolf King Aldrin Vare. Majesty. A tutor receives many notices before a royal feast. Receipt does not mean alarm. Mourning rite was named. Yes. That does not prove I believed the correction card necessary. Brienne kept her hands folded over her patched gray sleeves. Then you should have left it unburned until you were sure. Livia's smile returned, thin and cold. Every servant thinks delay is wisdom when she fears responsibility. Brienne looked at the frozen cupbearer near the first wine tray. The girl's hands trembled so hard that silver cups chimed against one another. No, Brienne said. Servants fear being blamed for instructions given above them. The young cupbearer's eyes filled. Aldrin noticed. His face did not soften. That was almost worse. Brienne could feel him beginning to understand the shape of his own court, but understanding did not yet protect anyone. He looked at Livia. Was the first cup arranged before Keswick entered? Livia answered too smoothly. The first cup order is prepared before all formal entries. Brienne turned toward the tray. Bring the first cupboard. Livia's gaze snapped to her. Small. Fast. Aldrin saw it. Bring it, he said. The steward at the wine table hesitated, then took a narrow silver board from beneath the tray. It was etched with names and cup positions. He carried it forward with both hands, as if the board might bite. Brienne did not reach for it first. She looked at Aldrin. He took it, and set it on the black stone before her. No apology. No merci. But the record no longer moved through Livia's hand. Brienne knelt beside the board. Lord Keswick should have received no cup until host recognition was spoken and refusal right offered. Livia said, He was honored with first wine. He was trapped with it. A murmur moved through the court. Brienne pointed to the first position. Keswick placed first. Aldrin looked down. That is insult? Not alone. She pointed to the second. Revel placed opposite him under hunting banner. Lord Ravel swallowed. Brienne pointed to the margin. Cupbearer instruction. Lift on entry bow. The young servant whispered. I was told not to wait. Livia turned sharply. Silence. Aldrin's eyes lifted. The command in them struck before his voice did. Let her speak. The cupbearer shook. Mistress Sen said mourning slows the room. She said if Lord Keswick saw wine first, he would remember he was guest before grieving father. The hall chilled. Lord Keswick's wolf-gold eyes burned. Guest before father, he said softly. The rafters groaned. From the carved beams above, old claw marks filled with silver dust. Brienne rose at once. Do not answer that yet. Keswick looked at her. Not kindly, but he listened. Livia's voice sharpened. You presume to direct a lord now? I am preventing him from using the insult your order handed him. The moon rectangles shivered. Still, they did not complete the proof. Brienne understood why. A servant's fear was not enough in old court law. The board had to show the sequence. She looked to the steward. Where is the host recognition line? The steward stared at the silver board. It is not written, Livia said, because the king's recognition is understood. Not under mourning rite, Brienne said. Grief must be named before wine. Aldrin's jaw tightened. What should have been written? Brienne drew the shape in the air, not touching the board. Host recognizes grief beneath roof. Harmed house may refuse first cup without dishonor. Hunting hands remain lowered until acceptance. The burned card before her brightened faintly. Aldrin saw it. Continue. Brienne looked at Livia. First cup order was changed after the morning notice. Keswick was placed first, so wine would rise before refusal right. Livia laughed. You imagine conspiracy in seating. Cup order is not seating. No. It is service. It is law, when grief enters first. The court went still. That was the part nobles always hated. The moment servants' work became law because law needed hands to survive. Brienne pointed to the board's lower corner. There should be a steward mark and a tutor mark, if the order was unchanged. Aldrin turned the board. The steward mark sat in dull silver. Beside it, Livia's tutor mark had been pressed over a scraped line. The steward gasped. That was not... Livia cut in. Boards are corrected before service. Brienne looked at the scrape. Yes. This one was corrected after the herald notice. How can you know? Because mourning notice wax is blue. It smears when handled beside silver service boards. She pointed. A small blue crescent clung beneath Livia's tutor mark. Aldrin's eyes darkened. The moon cards waited. Brienne named the sequence clearly. Morning. Right notice announced. Livia received it. Western Wolf correction card held and burned. First cupboard altered after notice. Wax touched the tutor mark. Keswick placed first. Ravel placed opposite under hunting banner. Cupbearer ordered to lift wine on entry bow before refusal right could be spoken. Only then did the burned cards answer. Silver fire crossed the first cupboard, circled the blue wax crescent, and ran along the cupbearer's trembling tray. A line formed in moon ink above the silver cups. First cup order was changed after Keswick's morning rite notice reached the tutor. Aldrin looked from the altered board to Livia Sen. His voice did not soften. Who changed my first cup to force grief into fellowship before refusal right? The silver cups began to frost. Not with winter, with old court judgment. First cup order was changed after Keswick's morning rite notice reached the tutor. The line hung over the wine tray, while the young cupbearer stood beneath it, both hands locked around a service plate she had never been powerful enough to refuse. Her eyes flicked from Wolf King Aldrin Vare to court tutor Livia Sen, Then to Brienne Calrow. Brienne knew that look. Servants learned early that blame traveled downward faster than blood. Livia's face softened in a way that made Brienne colder than anger would have. Majesty, if an error was made at first cup, it was a service error. The girl lifted too soon. Court servants must know when to wait. The cupbearer went white. Brienne stepped between the girl and the court before she thought better of it. Livia's eyes sharpened. Mistress Calrow forgets her place again. No, Brienne said. I remember hers. The hall quieted. Aldrin looked at Brienne, then at the trembling girl behind her. His expression did not soften. He still wore the face of a king who wanted truth, but had not yet counted the cost of needing it. What place? He asked. The shielded place, Brienne said. A servant, carrying first cup under Old House risk, must be given a shield phrase before entering service. Livia gave a small laugh. A nursery charm. A legal separation, Brienne said. The hand serves. The insult belongs above it. The cupbearer made a small sound behind her. Lord Keswick's wolf-gold eyes narrowed. That phrase should have been spoken. Livia turned toward him. My lord, surely you do not mean to make a court matter out of a servant's forgotten line. Keswick's grief moved like a shadow across his face. My son died with a servant holding his reins. I know the difference between a hand and the order behind it. The rafters groaned again. Brienne felt the old curse, listening. Aldrin stepped down one stair from the throne dais. Where was the shield phrase written? Brienne looked at the dead hearth. On the servant shield card. Livia spread her hands. Another burned card. Yes, Brienne said. Another protection you called fussing. The moon etiquette cards did not answer. They waited. Brienne turned to the cupbearer. What were you told before service? The girl's lips trembled. Livia's voice cut in. She is frightened. Her memory is unreliable. Aldrin did not look away from the girl. Speak. The command was not gentle, but it opened a path. The girl swallowed. Mistress Sen said first wine rises when Lord Keswick bows. She said no extra phrase, no pause, no widow. Correction at my elbow. Widow correction. The insult landed. Brienne held still. Aldrin's gaze moved to her face, and for one dangerous moment, she saw the recognition there, not of her pain, but of the court's habit of making her pain useful only after it became evidence. She refused to soften. Bring the servant service strip, she said. Livia's mouth tightened. Small. Faust. Aldrin saw it. Bring it, he ordered. The steward retrieved a narrow strip of pale leather from beneath the wine tray. It listed the cupbearer's route in tiny ink marks. Threshold, first cup, King's Nod, Western Guest, Second House, Music Rise. Brienne looked at the margin. Blank. There should be a shield phrase here. Livia exhaled. Not every service strip requires ancient clutter. Under mourning rite, it does. Aldrin took the strip and studied it. What phrase? Brienne spoke carefully, because words mattered most when powerful people wanted them small. This hand bears cup, not insult. This service belongs to crown, not grievance. Let blame rise to the mouth that ordered it. The cupbearer began to cry silently. The moon rectangle near the tray brightened, but still did not complete. Brienne understood. The phrase missing was not enough. The court had to know it had been removed. She pointed to the edge of the leather strip. There is a cut. The steward leaned in. A trimming cut. No. Brienne turned the strip toward the hearthlight. Moon leather darkens where ink is scraped. This edge was not trimmed before writing. A line was removed. Livia's voice stayed smooth. Service strips are adjusted constantly. Then the adjustment mark should bear steward silver. Aldrin looked at the edge. It does not. Brienne pointed to the faintest pale impression near the cut. Tudor wax. The hall froze. Livia's seal again. Not full. Not clean. But enough. Livia said, My office approves service flow. That is not guilt. No, Brienne said. The sequence is, she laid the service strip beside the altered first cupboard, the blue thread mourning notice, and the cold ash of the burned cards. Then she named it. Mourning, right notice received. First, cupboard changed. Cupbearer ordered to lift wine on entry bow. Servant shield phrase omitted. Leather strip cut after writing. Tutor wax on the removed margin. The moon rectangles turned around the cupbearer. Silver fire crossed the service strip and ran along the cut edge. For a breath, the missing words appeared as pale ghost ink where they had been removed. Then a line formed above the tray. Servant shield phrase was removed before the cupbearer was ordered to lift first wine. The young girl dropped to her knees. Not from guilt, from release. Aldrin looked from the cut service strip to Livia Sen. His voice did not soften. Who left a servant to carry an old house insult without protection? The cupbearer's tears did what royal command had not. They made the court look down. Not at the moon rectangles. Not at Lord Keswick's grief. Not at Lord Ravel's lowered hunting hand. Down at the girl kneeling beside the wine tray, released from carrying an insult she had never been allowed to understand. Brienne Calrow stood before her, ash on her widow's sleeves, the burned cards turning slowly around the hall. Livia Sen's voice cooled. Majesty, Mistress Calrow is turning a court correction into servant theater. Brienne did not look at her. Servants are where noble mistakes are placed when no one wants them near a crest. The young cupbearer covered her mouth. A few old servants near the pillars went very still. Wolf King Aldrin Vare looked at Brienne. His face did not soften, but something in his gaze had sharpened past suspicion. Can the court be restored? He asked. Yes. Livia exhaled with relief too quickly. Brian heard it. So did Eldon. But I will not restore the protocols, while servants and widows remain open to public insult, Brienne said. The hall chilled. Livia's smile vanished. You will not? No. You refuse your king? Brienne finally turned toward Aldrin. I refuse to rebuild a floor that drops the lowest person through it first. Aldrin held her gaze. The old wolf pressure in the room gathered around him, dark and controlled. Once, that pressure would have forced every spine straight. Now the court still stood broken beneath floating cards, because command could not stand on insult. Name the protection, he said. No apology, no tenderness, but he asked in front of everyone. Widow's entry right, Brienne said. Servant shield phrase. Correction immunity. Livia gave a short laugh. Correction immunity? You mean permission for servants to scold nobles. I mean protection for the person who speaks before a mistake becomes law. The moon cards brightened faintly. Not enough. Brienne understood. She had named the protections. Now she had to show which one was burned first. Bring the widow. Entry card ash, she said. Livia's expression sharpened. Small. Fast. Aldrin saw it. Bring it, he ordered. The hearthguard returned to the old wolf hearth and sifted the cold blue ash into a second silver tray. Brienne knelt beside it, careful not to touch, until she found the shape. The moon etiquette cards had burned differently depending on what law they carried. Greeting cards curled inward. Cup cards left silver circles. Servant shield cards left cut lines. Widow cards left half moons. There, a charred crescent, pale at one edge. Brienne pointed. Widow's entry right. Livia folded her hands. Irrelevant to Lord Keswick. No, Brienne said. Relevant to who was allowed to correct his entrance. Aldrin looked down. Read it. Brienne's throat tightened. This card had protected her more times than anyone knew. It was the reason she could stand near noble thresholds at all after her husband died. Without it, she was only a low-born widow speaking out of turn. The widow who has buried service under crown roof may correct grief. Entry before feast law begins, Brienne said. No noble may answer her correction with death. Place insult, bed insult, stable insult, hunger insult, or remarriage command. The hall went silent. Stable insult. Livia had said it before the fire. Your husband died in a stable corridor. Aldrin looked at Livia. She did not lower her eyes. Common speech, Livia said. Not legal insult. Brienne lifted the charred crescent with the edge of a silver service knife. Then the card will not remember it. The crescent remained dim. Livia smiled. Brian did not stop. She looked toward the servant's stair. Bring the correction post list. A steward hurried away and returned with a narrow roll tied in gray thread. He handed it to Aldrin first. Aldrin broke the thread and set the list beside Brienne. Again, not kindness. Procedure. She took it. Her name had once been written beside the moon doors. Brienne Calrow, Widow Correction Post, Western Entry, Mourning and Refusal Forms. A line had been drawn through it. Beside the line was Livia's tutor seal. Replacement. None. Brienne's breath caught once. She had known she had been dismissed from the threshold that morning. She had not known the post had been erased. Aldrin's voice turned low. When? Brienne pointed to the ink. Before the burning, Livia said. The court requested fewer visible corrections. The court requested comfort, Brienne said. You removed the person who could protect it from insult. The moon rectangles trembled. Still waiting. Brienne placed the correction post list beside the widow entry ash and the servant strip. Sequence matters. She named it clearly. Keswick's mourning. Right entry announced. Widow correction post crossed out. No replacement assigned. Widow's entry card burned. Livia answered my warning with a stable insult forbidden by the same card. Servant shield phrase removed. Cupbearer ordered to carry first wine. The charred crescent flared. Silver fire crossed the post list, circled Brienne's erased name, and rose around Livia's tutor seal. A line formed above the ashtray. Widow Correction Authority was erased before Brienne Calrow warned the court. The old rafters groaned again. Not with threat now. With memory? Aldrin looked from Brienne's erased name to Livia Sen. His voice did not soften. Who removed the widow allowed to correct grief? Entry before the insult began. The erased name on the correction post list began to shine. Not brightly. That would have been easier for the nobles to fear. It shone like moonlight caught under thin ice, quiet and accusing, circling the line drawn through Brienne Calrow's name. The Vare old court watched that little silver wound, as if it were more dangerous than Lord Keswick's grief, more dangerous than the frozen cupbearers, more dangerous than the pale rectangles still hovering around every broken courtesy. Livia Sen bowed toward Wolf King Aldrin Vare. Majesty, correction posts are appointments, not blood rights. Mistress Calrow was removed from the moon doors to reduce confusion before foreign houses arrived. Brienne looked at her. No, I was removed so no one noble had to be corrected before witnesses. Livia's eyes sharpened. There is a difference between protection and humiliation. Yes, Brienne said. Protection stops blood law. Humiliation burns the protection and blames the widow who named the fire. Aldrin looked down at the correction post list. His face did not soften. Brienne was glad for that. Softness would have asked her to forgive before the old court had finished telling truth. Can the protocols be restored from memory? He asked. Yes. The court breathed. Brienne did not let the breath become relief. But I will not restore them. While correction immunity remains broken, Livia laughed softly. There. She bargains with the crown. Brienne turned toward Aldrin. No. I name the floor before anyone is asked to stand on it. Aldrin's wolf-gray eyes held hers. What is correction immunity? The right to speak a required correction without being punished for insulting a noble. Lord Revell looked at the floor. The young cupbearer wiped her face with the back of one sleeve. Several old servants near the pillars stood very still. Aldrin heard the silence behind the answer. Who held it? Threshold widows, first cup servants, mourning heralds, guest distance attendants, and any old courtkeeper assigned to prevent legal insult before first wine. Livia said, "An absurdly broad license for lower people to embarrass guests." Brienne looked at her. "It is only embarrassing to be corrected if pride matters more than the curse you are about to wake." The rafters gave a low wooden groan. Aldrin looked up. The old claw marks in the beams still glowed faint silver. Brienne saw understanding enter his face like a blade. The old court was not angry because manners had failed. It was angry because protection had been stripped from the people responsible for stopping failure. "Bring the correction immunity register," Aldrin said. Livia went still. Small. Fast. Brienne saw it. Aldrin saw her see it. A steward crossed to the side archive and returned with a narrow black book clasped in dull silver. He carried it, as if he wished he had been born far from courts and cups and old wolf laws. Aldrin opened the clasp himself and set the book before Brienne. No apology, no tenderness. But again, the record did not pass through Livia's hand. Brienne turned the pages. Names appeared in careful columns. Widow correction post. Active. First cup shield servant. Active. Mourning herald. Active. Guest distance attendant. Active. Then the current feast page. Suspended for visual harmony. Brienne stopped. The words sat there in neat Tudor ink, colder than any insult, shouted across a hall. Aldrin read them over her shoulder. Visual harmony. Livia stepped forward. The feast required elegance. Constant interruptions make old courts look provincial. Brienne looked around the broken hall. Frozen nobles, trembling servants, a grieving lord barely held from legal fury, and pale cards circling like lost moons. "Does this look elegant?" she asked. No one answered. Brienne continued reading. Correction immunity suspended from moonrise until end of winter obedience feast. Verbal correction restricted to Tudor office. Low service interruption prohibited except by direct, noble invitation. The cupbearer whispered. "That is why I could not speak," Livia snapped. "You were not asked." Brienne turned on her. "That is the point." The moon rectangles stirred. Still, they did not speak. Brienne knew what they wanted. Not outrage. Sequence. She placed the immunity register beside the correction post list. Servant shield strip, first cupboard, morning notice, and card ash. Then she looked toward the old servants. Who received the suspension order? No one moved. Fear still had roots. Aldrin's voice cut across the hall. Answer without penalty. That was not enough. Brienne said, "Say the shield first." Aldrin looked at her. She did not lower her eyes. His jaw tightened. Then, before the whole court, he said, "This hand bears service, not insult. This answer belongs to crown law, not grievance." The old servants inhaled as one. Only then did the wine steward speak. "We received it from Tudorsen before the guests arrived, Majesty." Livia's face remained calm. "Under court authority." Brienne pointed to the register margin. "Not full court authority. Tudor seal only." Aldrin looked down. There it was. Livia's moon, quill seal, pressed alone over the suspension order. No king's mark, no steward's silver, no old court countermark. Brienne's voice stayed level. Correction immunity was suspended before Keswick entered, before Ravel answered, before the cupbearer lifted wine, before I warned the court. Servants and widows were forbidden to interrupt noble air, except by invitation from the very nobles making it. Livia's lips thinned, because correction had become disorder. "No," Brienne said. Correction had become inconvenient. The black register trembled. Silver fire crossed the suspended page, circled Livia's lone Tudor seal, then spread outward to the servants standing near the walls. Pale moon rectangles appeared before them too. But unlike the noble cards, these did not accuse. They shielded. A clean line formed above the register. Correction immunity for widows and servants was suspended before the old house insult began. The cupbearer stopped shaking. Lord Keswick lowered his grief hand at last, not fully, but enough to show he had heard the protection restored. Aldrin looked from the glowing register to Livia Sen. His voice did not soften. Who stripped correction from the only people close enough to stop my court from insulting itself? The shield cards appeared before the servants first. Small, pale rectangles, thinner than noble cards, rimmed not in accusation but in quiet silver. They hovered near wrists, trays, aprons, broom handles, herald cords, and patched sleeves, marking the people who had stood closest to disaster with the least protection from blame. The fair old court looked at them and understood too late that courtesy had never belonged only to nobles. Livia Sen understood something else. Brienne Calrow saw it in the tutor's face before Livia smoothed the fear away. Not anger, fear. The moon etiquette cards had begun with Lord Keswick's insult, but the old court was no longer looking only at morning rite. It was counting every protection Livia had stripped away before the feast, every correction removed, every servant silenced, every widow exposed. Wolf King Aldrin Vare stood beside the glowing correction immunity register. Who stripped correction from the only people close enough to stop my court from insulting itself? His voice did not soften. Livia bowed. Majesty, I suspended correction immunity to preserve rank order. Without hierarchy, no court survives. Brienne looked at the servants' shield cards. Without protection, only the cruel survive rank. A few nobles shifted at that. Livia's eyes hardened. You make courtesy sound like law because law gives servants more weight than they deserve. No, Brienne said. Courtesy became law because old blood once proved pride could ruin a house before a blade was drawn. The moon rectangles turned, not toward Keswick, toward Livia. For the first time, the tutor looked away from them. Aldrin noticed. What old blood? He asked. Brienne's pulse slowed. She had suspected since the first card burned. Not the whole truth, not yet, but enough. Livia had not burned the moon etiquette cards merely because nobles disliked correction. She had burned them too quickly, too precisely. She had watched the Western greeting card as if it were a knife pointed backward. Bring the guest. Distance register, Brienne said. Livia's voice went sharp. That has nothing to do with the first cup insult. It has everything to do with why you feared the cards. Silence fell. Aldrin looked to the archive steward. Bring it. The steward hesitated. Majesty, the guest distance register is old court memory. It names entry ranks for houses admitted before full recognition. Bring it. The book arrived bound in gray wolf hide, its silver clasp tarnished from disuse. Brienne did not touch it first. Aldrin opened the clasp and set it before her, his expression hard enough to hold back every noble objection rising in the room. No apology, no gentleness, but the court's memory was being placed in Brienne's hands. She turned the pages by house. Keswick, Ravel, Mornridge, Falomir, Sen. Livia stood very still. Brienne stopped. House Sen's entry line had been scraped thin, then written over in newer ink. Aldrin leaned closer. Read it. Brienne did not rush. House Sen admitted under tutor service petition. Temporary guest. Distance granted until old house greeting completed. Livia exhaled. Exactly. My family entered through lawful service. Brienne looked at the scraped line beneath. That is the rewritten entry. The old court stirred. Livia's smile chilled. Careful. Brienne did not look up. I am. She lifted the guest distance register toward the cold hearthlight. Under the newer ink, pale moon fibers held the shadow of older words. Aldrin's gaze sharpened. Can you read it? Not alone. The cards brightened, but did not speak. Brienne understood. Again, not magic first, memory first. She looked to the servant standing near the side pillars. Who keeps old guest seating leaves? An elderly footman stepped forward, hands shaking. Under the north stair, mistress. Livia snapped. Those are discarded seating scraps. Brienne looked at Aldrin. Old courts discard nothing that once kept bloodlines apart. Aldrin gave the order. The footman returned with a packet of brittle leaves tied in faded blue thread. He offered it to Aldrin, who placed it before Brienne. She opened the packet. There it was, a seating leaf from the year House Sen entered court. The names were arranged by a loud distance from the throne, from first bloodline arc to servant petition bench. House Sen had not been written under Tudor service. It had been written beside guest refusal hold. Brienne's mouth went dry. Livia said, "Old seating leaves are unreliable." Brienne pointed to the mark beside the name. "This is not seating. It is a breech hold." Aldrin's voice lowered. "Meaning?" Brienne answered carefully. "A house placed under guest refusal hold may not receive office, instruct protocol, or stand within 3 paces of royal oath until its entry insult is corrected." The court turned slowly toward Livia. Livia's face remained composed. "My family has served as Tudor line for 20 years. "Yes," Brienne said. "That is why you needed the cards burned." The moon rectangles flared. Aldrin's eyes cut to her. "Show the breach." Brienne looked back at the register. "A forbidden courtesy breach is not named from one record." Livia laughed softly, but the sound had no warmth. "At last, you admit you cannot prove it." "No," Brienne said. "I admit law requires sequence." She laid out the records. Guest, distance register, old seating leaf, correction immunity suspension, widow post erasure, first, cupboard, mourning notice, burned ash. Then she named only what the records allowed. House Sen entered under guest refusal hold. The register was later rewritten as Tudor service petition. Guest distance restriction disappeared. A Sen Tudor gained authority over protocols her house had not lawfully completed. The moon etiquette cards preserved old entry corrections. Livia burned the cards before the court could remember what her house owed. The old wolf hearth breathed cold. Silver fire rose from the seating leaf, crossed the rewritten Sen entry, and circled the scraped line beneath the newer ink. A pale card formed before Livia herself, larger than the others, edged in moon-white flame. A line appeared across it. House Sen entered the Vere Old Court under forbidden courtesy breach before receiving Tudor authority. The hall went still. Aldrin looked from the card to Livia Sen. His voice did not soften. "Who gave an uncorrected house authority to teach my court obedience?" The pale card before Livia Sen did not tremble. That made it worse. All the other moon etiquette cards had turned, flickered, or shivered when the old court counted insult. Livia's card hung still as winter glass, larger than the others, its moon-white edge bright enough to drain color from her face. House Sen entered the Vere Old Court under forbidden courtesy breach before receiving Tudor authority. The Vere Old Court went silent, in a way no command had achieved. Wolf King Aldrin Vere stood beside the gray wolf-hide register. "Who gave an uncorrected house authority to teach my court obedience?" His voice did not soften. Livia bowed, but the movement came a fraction late. "Majesty, Tudor authority was granted by royal appointment. Whatever old entry condition once existed for my family was resolved by service." Brienne Calrow looked at the scraped Sen line. "Service does not erase a breach. Correction does." Livia's eyes cut to her. "A widow with ash on her sleeves does not decide what royal appointment means." "No," Brienne said. "The old court does." The rafters answered with a low wooden crack. Silver dust fell from claw marks above the moon-wolf canopy. Aldrin looked up. Brienne saw the danger there. The old court was no longer merely showing insult. It was testing whether the king would stand on protocol or pride. If he chose rank over correction again, his command would weaken further. Livia spoke quickly. "Majesty, this is distraction. Lord Keswick's insult must be resolved. Mistress Calrow is dragging my family into spectacle to bargain for her lost position." Brienne did not look away from Aldrin. Then let the records clear her. Aldrin's jaw tightened. What record? The Tudor Authority Ledger. Livia went still. Small. Faust. Aldrin saw it. Bring it, he said. The archive steward moved toward the eastern shelves, then stopped as if waiting for Livia's permission. Aldrin's eyes turned on him. The steward bowed and hurried. The ledger he returned with was black, narrow, and banded in silver. It bore the Vere royal mark on the front, but beneath it sat the Tudor office seal. Livia's moon quill. Brienne did not touch it first. Aldrin opened the clasp himself and set it before her. No apology, no tenderness. But once more, the record did not pass through Livia's hand. Brienne turned the pages. Tudor lines before Livia's family had been appointed under Old House clearance. Bloodline distance confirmed. Guest refusal settled. Service petition accepted. Correction oath witnessed. Then Hausen. Tudor authority granted under provisional grace. Brienne stopped. Aldrin read over her shoulder. Provisional grace. Livia exhaled. There. Lawful. Brienne shook her head. Temporary. Royal. Conditional. Aldrin's eyes sharpened. On what? Brienne followed the next line with her gaze. Correction oath to be completed before first winter obedience feast. The hall seemed to pull in a breath. Livia's face remained composed. Too composed. Aldrin looked at the date. That was 20 years ago. Yes, Brian said. Livia lifted her chin. The oath was completed. Then bring the correction oath leaf. Livia's silence was very small, but the old court heard it. Aldrin turned to the steward. Bring it. The steward searched the side archive longer this time. When he returned, he carried only a thin folder bound in white thread, empty at the center. Brienne opened it. Inside lay one torn hinge of parchment and a note in Tudor ink, transferred to ceremonial archive. She looked toward the old hearth. Livia smiled faintly. Many old leaves are moved for preservation. Brienne looked at Aldrin. Ceremonial archive is beside the hearth. Aldrin's gaze went cold. The hearth guard sifted the ash again. This time the moon cards brightened before Brienne asked, not giving proof, pointing toward where memory had burned. Among the blue-white ash lay a curl of parchment, unlike the moon etiquette cards. Thinner, older, edged once in white thread. Brienne pointed. Correction oath leaf. Livia's voice sharpened. Ash cannot testify to content. No, Brienne said. But sequence can. She lifted the burned hinge with the flat of the silver knife and placed it beside the Tudor authority ledger, the empty folder, the rewritten Sen entry, and the old seating leaf. The pale card before Livia remained still, waiting. Brian read the chain aloud. House Sen entered under guest refusal hold. Tudor authority granted under provisional grace. Correction oath required before first winter obedience feast. Oath leaf removed from authority folder. Folder marked transferred to ceremonial archive. Oath leaf burned with the moon etiquette cards. No completed correction remains. In the authority ledger. Livia laughed softly. Absence again. You build accusation from missing paper. Brienne looked at her. No. From missing correction. Aldrin's hand flexed at his side. The old court felt it. The moon rectangles around the nobles tilted toward the throne, as if waiting to learn whether command would pretend not to understand. Brienne turned one more page in the Tudor authority ledger. There, in pale ink almost faded to gray, was a restriction line. Until correction oath is witnessed, House Sen may advise service manners, but may not instruct old bloodline protocol. She looked up. Livia's face did not change. That told Brienne everything. Aldrin read the line himself. His voice became quieter. You were never permitted to teach old bloodline protocol, Livia answered carefully. The court required stability. My family provided it. No, Brienne said. You provided silence where correction should have stood. The old hearth breathed cold. Silver fire rose from the burned oath hinge, ran across the provisional grace line, and circled the faded restriction in the tutor ledger, the still card before Livia finally moved, turning once toward every frozen noble she had taught to ignore correction. A line formed in moon ink beneath the first. House Sen received old court tutor authority before its correction oath was witnessed. Aldrin looked from the glowing ledger to Livia Sen. His voice did not soften. Who let an uncorrected tutor burn the laws she was never cleared to teach? The old wolf hearth cracked down the center. A line of cold silver ran through the black stone. Not flame, not smoke, but memory forcing itself through the place where Livia Sen had burned the laws she was never cleared to teach. The Vare Old Court watched the crack spread beneath the ashtrays, past the altered first cupboard, past the servant shield strip, past Brienne Calro's erased correction post, and toward the throne. Not attacking, measuring. Wolf King Aldrin Vare stood beside the tutor authority ledger, his face carved hard around the truth. House Sen received old court tutor authority before its correction oath was witnessed. Livia bowed slowly. Majesty, old restrictions do not outweigh royal necessity. My family served this court for 20 years. Brienne looked at the burned oath hinge. Service without correction can become 20 years of polished trespass. Livia's eyes flashed. You would tear down a tutor house over ash? No, Brienne said. Over what the ash still remembers. Aldrin's voice cut through the hall. Answer the ledger. Livia lifted her chin. My appointment came under the crown. And the crown, Aldrin said, stood on an incomplete oath. The moon rectangles trembled. For the first time, command touched the old court again. Not fully, but enough that every noble felt it. Livia heard it too. Her face tightened. If you void my authority now, the feast collapses. Brienne turned toward Lord Keswick, still standing under mourning right near the threshold. The feast already collapsed when grief was answered as prey. Lord Keswick's wolf-gold eyes remained fixed on the room. And still, I wait to know whether the Vare roof names my grief safe. The rafters groaned. Aldrin looked at Brienne. Restore it. Brienne held his chaza. No. The word made the court inhale. Livia seized it. There, she refuses the king. Brienne did not look at her. I refuse to restore a court that will use my memory and leave every servant and widow exposed the next time a noble feels embarrassed. Aldrin's jaw tightened. Brienne felt the force of him, the old wolf crown pressing against the room, the danger in making a king choose humility before witnesses. But she had been corrected by grief, hunger, insult, and silence. She would not be frightened by power wearing a crown. Name what must stand first, Aldrin said. No apology. Not yet. But in front of every house, he asked. Brienne pointed to the servant shield card. First, shield the cupbearer. Aldrin turned to the trembling girl. This hand bore cup, not insult. The order belongs above her. The shield rectangle before the girl brightened. Brienne pointed to her own erased name. Second, restore correction immunity for widows, servants, heralds, and old court keepers assigned before first wine. Aldrin looked to the steward. Write it. The steward found ink with shaking hands. Livia spoke sharply. Majesty, correction immunity cannot outrank noble dignity. Brienne answered before Aldrin could. It does not outrank dignity. It prevents dignity from becoming blood debt. The silver crack in the hearth steadied. Brienne pointed to Lord Revel. Third, lower the hunting hand and speak the harmlessness form. Ravel swallowed. I do not know it. Then, repeat. He nodded, shame making him young. Brienne said, My hand answered wrongly. My house claims no pursuit. Grief under this roof is not prey. Ravel repeated it, voice breaking. The moon card before him dimmed from accusation to record. Lord Keswick's breath changed. Not forgiveness, not peace, but the old curse stopped climbing the rafters. Brienne pointed to Aldrin. Fourth, the host recognizes grief before wine. Every eye turned to the Wolf King. Aldrin stepped down from the throne dais until he stood not above Keswick, but within speaking distance. Lord Keswick, of the Western House, he said, your grief enters under my roof without pursuit, without mockery, without forced fellowship. You may refuse first cup without dishonor to your dead, your house, or the crown. Lord Keswick's hand lowered fully. The candles straightened. The court remembered how to breathe. Brienne looked at the cupbearer. Now wine may be offered. Not lifted into his hand. Offered. The girl approached slowly, protected by the pale rectangle at her wrist. She stopped at the proper distance and held the cup low. Lord Keswick looked at her, then at Brienne. I refuse first cup until my son's name is spoken. Brienne bowed her head. That is his right. Eldrin did not ask Livia. He asked Keswick. His name, Edrin Keswick. Aldrin repeated it before the court. Edrin Keswick is named beneath the Vare roof. The old wolf hearth gave one cold blue breath. The floating moon etiquette cards turned from sharp accusation to pale order. Around servants they became shields. Around nobles they became reminders. Around Livia, the largest card remained bright. Brienne looked at the Tudor ledger. One correction remains. Livia's voice was almost a whisper. You would strip my house. No, Brienne said. Your house may enter correctly, but not teach what it has not obeyed. Aldrin looked to the guards. Livia Sen is removed from court tutor authority. House Sen returns to guest refusal hold until its correction oath is witnessed before old court law. Every instruction issued under uncorrected old blood authority is suspended for review. Livia stepped back, as if struck, her pale card lowered before her, not like a sentence of death, but like a door closing. The moon ink formed one final line. Courtesy protects the court, before command can rule it. Aldrin read it. Then he turned to the whole hall. From this night, old court law recognizes courtesy as protection, not decoration. No correction card may be destroyed for noble comfort. No servant may carry old house insult without shield phrase. No widow assigned to grief entry may be answered with public insult. No tutor may instruct bloodline protocol without completed correction oath. No one applauded. Good. Some laws should return without noise. Aldrin turned to Brienne. The court quieted in a different way. I allowed your cards to burn, he said. Brienne looked at him. Yes, I let correction be treated as embarrassment. Yes, I let them call protection fussing, because it was easier than making nobles feel small. Yes, he did not ask forgiveness. That was why she stayed. Aldrin removed the silver obedience ring from his hand and set it beside the ashtray where the burned moon etiquette cards had returned. Command stands after correction, he said. Brienne looked at the servants first. The cupbearer, the herald, the old footman, the widows near the side doors whose gray sleeves had been mocked into silence for years. They signed the restored protocol first, she said. Aldrin nodded. Yes, and the cards are recopied from servant memory before noble preference is heard. Yes, and Livia's insult to my husband is entered. A pause moved through the court. Then Aldrin said, yes. Only then did Brienne step to the old hearth. She did not gather the ash as if it were ruined paper. She gathered it as law that had survived fire. The pale moon rectangles lowered one by one, stacking themselves in the air before her, not whole cards, not repaired, but enough to be copied by hands that had remembered what power forgot. At dawn, the Vare Old Court bowed again, not because Aldrin commanded it, because Brienne restored the order that allowed command to mean something. The servants signed first, the widows signed after them, the herald signed with tears on his face. Aldrin signed beneath Brienne Calrow's name. Later, when she walked past the old wolf hearth with moon ash on her sleeves, the Wolf King followed one step behind, carrying the burned correction tray where every noble could see it. He did not claim her. He did not crown her. He walked beneath the pale restored cards while the old court obeyed again, and for the first time in years, every noble understood that courtesy had been the shield standing between pride and blood.